Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick preview for the Sony A6500. This interchangeable lens APS-C E-mount camera was announced alongside the RX100 Mark V, and in my opinion really does represent one of Sony's greatest offerings to date, and that's because it really truly integrates all of their best digital imaging tech into a compact interchangeable lens camera. So at $1,400 US, not an inexpensive camera by any means, and launching towards the end of November, you're looking at a 24.2 megapixel camera, just like the A6300, which by the way, this does not supplant, but rather complements, that now integrates basically everything that Sony's DI department could offer in an APS-C form factor. Not only do we have the same 425 phase detection autofocus system, the fastest autofocus system that you'll find on any mirrorless camera, or any camera for that matter, in the world, 11 frames per second continuous shooting, into, again, a very compact form factor, but we also now have 5-axis in-body image stabilization, something you really couldn't find in any APS-C camera from Sony. They now also integrate a touchscreen, something that many of you have been waiting for, the same great electronic OLED EVF found on the previous generation, which the A6300, which again isn't the previous gen, but did precede this rather. And I do wish that this and the A6300 had been launched side by side. It would make sense considering these are aimed at two different customers, even though they may overlap. This, of course, geared more towards the professional. Beyond the 11 frames per second high continuous shooting speed and 8 frame per second live view continuous, we now have an expanded buffer, again because of the same reason on the RX100 Mark V, and that's that new front end. I believe it's up to over 300 frames continuous without buffering, 300 shots rather, which is really impressive. I expect the in-body 5-axis stabilization to be very similar to what's found in the much more expensive A7R Mark II, and possibly in the successor to that camera, and of course what's now in the A99 Mark II. You can see right here the huge buffer, up to 307 images over 35 seconds in continuous shooting, and that's because of that new front end. Without it, you would not be able to achieve that. This is something that we're seeing for the first time in cameras from Sony. I already mentioned the touchscreen. This is something that people have been waiting for. The full extent of the touchscreen, I'm not completely sure of, but the point is that you'll be able to use this for focusing, and that is really the most critical element possible. 4K video recording, this is important because Sony is going again with oversampling from 6K data so that we get 0 pixel binning, true 4K, and that already means cleaner video than the A6300, so yet another advantage to differentiate between it and its sibling. The viewfinder I already mentioned. Autofocus still there. 200,000 cycle lifespan, at least is what it's been tested for. The lock-on autofocus system I expect to be very similar to the 4D system found on the A6300, where it all began. More advanced image processing because of its front-end LSI, just like the RX100 Mark V. You also have improved slow and quick motion, as Sony puts it, up to 5 times slow motion and up to 60 times quick motion that you can record at up to 50 megabits per second in full HD. You can see you can also do 1 to 120 frames per second, as well as 24p and 30p or 60p recording format. The slow motion, definitely a nice touch here. Unlike the RX100 Mark V, where I think the slow motion is clearly a gimmick simply because the output is not that impressive, here you are getting a completely different beast because there's far more prowess when it comes to the APS-C processor under the hood with this camera, and then the ability to pair it with a wide multitude of glass, unlike years past. Autofocus magnifier, another thing I'm pretty sure that, of course, you can use with the touchscreen. That's a nice add-on. You have S-gamut and S-log shooting, something that has become standard for Sony cameras these days. Gamma display assist, zebra function, No shock there. Dust and moisture resistance. It's a magnesium alloy body for those of you wondering about its ability to handle the heavier E-mount full-frame lenses. Sony wants to make sure that you know you can shoot with any E-mount glass, or any glass for that matter, if you're going to adapt third-party lenses, because with that 5-axis stabilization, you are gaining 5 steps, and you can now add stabilization to lenses that have none, whether they're Sony or otherwise. Silent shooting, of course, is still there. You can take advantage of that, another great element of the Sony system. Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, NFC, exactly what you would expect from Sony. I don't believe we're seeing a revamp completely of the menu, but they are doing a new interface, so that's good. Very similar to what I expect we're going to see out of the A99 Mark II. Same theme. Still have the Play Memory Store for those of you wondering, so you can buy applications for your camera to expand and make life easier when it comes to doing creative things that would traditionally require post-processing. You can also finally, name your files. You can see that. I mean, these are just clear signs of Sony listening to customers, especially on the professional side, not the entry-level consumer side, and acknowledging that they can easily make these changes, satisfy customers, and everybody wins. I mean, that is really the truth of the matter. Beyond that, enhanced remote camera control functions, which will be interesting to play with, priority set and auto white balance, and enhanced auto exposure functions. In terms of specifications, I already mentioned, we've got that half-second autofocus system because of the 425 phase detection hybrid system that it has, the built-in 5-axis stabilization, 24.2 megapixel sensor, which I expect to outperform, the 6300. By how much? I don't know. The Bionz X processor, I still expect to be the backbone of the Sony lineup, which it has been now for quite some time. The 4K video should only be cleaner. By how much, we'll only know once I get into my hands, start shooting that Super 35 with no pixel binning. And above and beyond, better sensitivity, around the same battery life, same form factor. So just an improvement, that buffer being much larger, the ability to shoot over 307 images literally continuously. That is just something you wouldn't have thought possible. And that's all the more reason between the RX 100 Mark V, this camera, that I believe whatever's coming out on the full frame side for Sony in the A7 lineup, if that's an A9, whatever it may be, don't be surprised when Sony busts out a camera that has no buffering, because it seems that's the direction we're going. Sony wants to get pros to cross over, and one of the things holding them back has been that buffer time. They continue to make great DI devices like this, but not necessarily with the prowess when it comes to the buffer side of things, and that's why they're taking care of it. So a lot of things to like about the A6500. I think the price is justifiable, especially when compared to the competition. This is arguably one of the most competent APS-C mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras ever made, both for pros and regular consumers alike. It also still keeps the A6300 in the mix, because even though there isn't a huge price difference, I think if you already own it, you won't necessarily be jumping to grab this, get this in your hands, unless you really need that extra buffer. Of course, I do think the 5-axis image stabilization is a game changer, more so than anything else. If you've used the A7R Mark II, you know how significant that is. In fact, if you've used any camera that's interchangeable with 5-axis stabilization, you know how critical that is, because it's really the difference between having watchable video footage and gaining steps versus having something that just looks like a mess unless you stabilize it in another form. So the A6500 holds a tremendous amount of qualities that I think will make it one of the most coveted cameras, not only of the end of this year, but through all of 2017. And I can't wait to get my hands on it, compare it to the A6300. Hope that you all enjoyed this video, and feel free to chime in the comments, post any questions or thoughts you may have. Hit that like button, and as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.